Hello and warm greetings. Welcome to the Analyst by Vajiram and Ravi, where we would try to comprehensively analyze 7 articles in 2 different sections, along with the daily mains answer writing program. In the analysis part, we'll first have a comprehensive discussion with respect to the imperative of adopting circular economy model amid the rising ill effects of climate change. Then, in the second article, we'll have a discussion with respect to the strategic importance of critical minerals, the associated challenges, and the way forward for India. Then, in the simplified section, we'll have a look at 5 different articles from a special perspective of UPSC Prelims 2026 along with the value addition. So stay tuned. January 3rd, 3 days in, still early enough to begin, still brave enough to try. Coming to the very first topic of today's discussion, this is with respect to linear to circular, rethinking India's cities. Especially after the LPG reforms of 1990s. By LPG, I mean to say the liberalization, privatization and globalization reforms of 1990s, what we have witnessed in India is increasing consumerism in the society. And this has been primarily because of increasing purchasing power. What we have been witnessing is increasing production and consumption in the society. Now, this primarily has 2 implications. One is that of the economic implications I'm talking about. That is, because of unsustainable and excessive production and consumption, what we have seen is a kind of scarcity of goods. And because of that, the average prices have increased, what we generally call as the inflation, which is affecting the bottom rung of the society the most, the poor. The second part is that of the environmental. And this is something which is very important. The kind of production and consumption patterns which we have in the society, they are unsustainable. And because of that, we have been witnessing the increasing ill effects to climate change, what we call as the anthropogenic climate change, right? Because which is primarily human induced, right? Now, there have been many research and there have been many people, environmentalists, who have been focusing upon a particular model of economy, what we call as the circular economy. Right now, what we are primarily having is a linear model, where the focus is on the production, the consumption, and the disposal of the particular good or commodity. But we need to adopt more sustainable models in the economy, and one of the promising models is that of circular economy, where we give equal importance to the reuse aspect, the recycling aspect. We have a very beautiful column which has been published in the Hindu and which focuses upon this aspect of circular economy, primarily in the context of the urban places. What the author is trying to focus is upon the fact that we are having these urban centers and they are producing goods and services at unsustainable levels, and because of that we have a similar level of production of the waste. This waste is something which is now beyond the capacity to manage. Therefore, we'll have to focus upon new sustainable models in terms of circular economy. Very, very important topic with respect to GS1. Because if I correlate with the urban aspect, very important, urbanization, and the second aspect of GS3, which is environment and conservation, very, very important. Now, before we talk about the aspects of circular economy, let's talk about the magnitude of the urban waste generated in India, which is mammoth, which is too much, right? If you look at this particular infographic, what you will see is that on a daily basis, the urban centers produce almost 130,000 to 150,000 tons of municipal solid waste per day. Now, if you basically cumulate this for the whole year, it turns out to be almost 55 to 65 million metric tons per year. Almost 55 to 65 million metric tons per year, right? Now, we all know that we are witnessing increasing urban population. Even the United Nations Population Fund Agency, what it says is that by the year 2050, we'll have 68% of the total population as the urban population, which was 38% in the year 2050, right? And this is the percent of urban population. Now, this has been given by United Nations Population Fund Agency. So, if we are having the rising urban population, it is but obvious that we'll have more of production and consumption in these places. Therefore, we'll result into more of waste. So we need to have adequate policy structure in place. Now, if you were to look at the data, you can see that this is projected to reach almost 165 million metric tons by the year 2030, and according to some estimates by ORF, Observer Research Foundation, this can even reach to almost 436 million metric tons by 2050, right? So this data is important. You can, in your answers, see, I always focus upon presenting your data in such a manner which is interesting to the examiner. So you can just have a graphical method of presentation, and that would definitely add credibility to your answer. Now, if I were to look at the per capita waste generation, it is almost 0.7 kg per person per day, right? Now, if I were to look at the segregation of the waste, almost 40 to 60% of the overall waste is that of organic in nature. Now, this is something which is a significant portion. And if this is utilized well, by utilization, I mean to say, if we recycle this well, definitely we can come up with those products which can definitely help in the agriculture, in the form of the fertilizers or in the form of biogas, but that is not being done at the right scale. Next, let's talk about the dry waste. Okay. So we have almost 30 to 35% of the dry waste. And in the dry waste, what you have to understand is that the majority of the portion is that of the plastic waste, almost 10 million tons per year, right? So if I were to give you the data, out of the total waste we have, that's around, let's say 55 million tons per year, we have almost 10 million tons of plastic. So almost 20%, 20 to 25% of the overall waste we are generating, it is that of the plastic. And we know that plastic is something which is very dangerous, which is very hazardous for the human health, primarily in terms of the microplastics, right? Because you must have heard about the bioaccumulation, the biomagnification, right? And that has debilitating consequences on the human health. I hope it is clear. Now, let's talk about the processing aspect. Out of the total waste generated in the country, only 75 to 80% is collected. Okay? So we are already collecting less of waste. And out of the waste which we are collecting, very less is being recycled. Only 30% of the waste which is being collected is recycled. So you can very well understand that if I were to look at the comprehensive picture, we are recycling very small amount of waste, be it the organic waste or be it the dry waste. And that is the reason what we are doing is we are accumulating a lot of waste, what we call as the legacy waste. Right? You must have seen or you must have heard about the big mountains we are having, the mountains of waste. In Okhla, we have Bhalswa, we have Ghazipur, right? So in Delhi, I'm talking about the places in Delhi itself. So this is something which is purely unsustainable, right? Now, landfill dependency, yes. Since we are not recycling, since we are not having proper processes, we are not applying different processes on the waste generated, what we are having is a condition where we are accumulating a lot of waste. And ultimately, we are having a lot of landfills, right? A large share of the Indian urban waste still ends up in the landfills with hundreds of dump sites. As I told you, we have Okhla in Delhi. Then we have, for example, Bhalswa, right? Then we have Ghazipur, right? These are some of the big mountains of the waste. Now, the issue with these dump sites is that first of all, we call them the legacy waste because it's not something which has come into the picture just now. This has been there for many years. But the issue is that the waste which is decomposed in these big mountains, it is decomposed anaerobically, that is without oxygen. And because of that, we have the production of methane. Now, methane is a very potent greenhouse gas, which has a much warming potential than that of the CO2, right? So you'll have to understand that because of these mountains of waste, we are generating, first of all, a lot of methane, which is a greenhouse gas, which has a lot of warming potential as compared to that of the carbon dioxide, right? Also, once we have these mountains, right, mountains of waste, a lot of the compounds, a lot of minerals, they get leached into the surface. And once they leach into the surface, what happens is that they disturb the quality of the aquifers, which contain the groundwater, right? You already seen what happened in Indore, right? There was a contamination of a bacteria over there. So similarly, we have a lot of these hazardous elements, heavy metals, right? And cadmium, for instance, mercury, for instance, and they leach out into the surface, and ultimately that has a very hazardous consequence for the human, right? I hope it is clear. Next aspect is that of the plastic. As I already told you, we have 20 to 30% of the plastic waste which is recycled. So out of the total plastics we are generating, only 20 to 30% is being recycled. You must have heard about the EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility, which mandate कि भाई जो producer है, whoever the producer is of a particular commodity or a good, he or she is liable for the life cycle maintenance of that particular product or good, right? Especially the end of life management. मतलब क्या है that particular person, the producer, he or she has to basically maintain and manage the whole life cycle of that particular good, especially the end of life, right? Which includes the disposal part, which includes the recycling part, but that is not being done. That is not being done effectively. Despite policies like Extended Producer Responsibility, India generates almost 1.5 to 1.8 million tons of e-waste. Yes. See, in India, what we are witnessing is the growth rate of the adoption of technology, especially after the years of 2000, it has been phenomenal, right? And because of that, we are generating a lot of e-waste. Now, in e-waste, what you would be surprised to know is a lot of heavy metals, a lot of important metals are used, right? But we are not recycling properly. And because of that, what is happening is that we have to invest a lot in the new products. What we can ideally do is we can even recycle the old products, but we are not having the recycling facilities. Most of the recycling which is being done, it is of informal nature. ठीक है, तो formalized नहीं है, the whole structure is not formalized, and because of that, it is the whole supply chain is very fragmented, right? So use these words again. The very focus on these words is because so that you can use these words. So the supply chain, the waste supply chain is very fragmented in nature. We have a dominance of the informal players, right? And therefore, in many of the cases, these informal players who are there, especially the rag pickers and the people who are engaged in the recycling industry, they are not having proper social security measures. Okay? And since they are dealing with these heavy metals, they are having occupational hazards. Occupational hazards, you must have heard about it, right? So these are some of the issues also which you can cite in your answer. But formal recycling rates remain low and informal sectors handle most of the workload, right? I hope it is clear. Now, why waste generation is something which is a very crucial aspect, especially when we look from the perspective of the climate change. See, in the recently held conference of parties 30 in Belém in Brazil, the waste management was emphasized as a key climate issue. And I've already told you the reason. It is primarily because of the CH4, methane. Because most of the organic waste, it is first of all not being recycled. It is being accumulated. And ultimately, it is leading to the production of methane, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. And it has a debilitating consequence on the overall climate, right? What we call as, it is increasing the warming potential of the earth, right? And a new initiative has been announced in this particular conference of party, which is the No Organic Waste, what we call as Now initiative. Also in India, we have the Life Mission, Mission Life. You must have heard that Prime Minister Modi has been focusing upon this particular mission for enhancing sustainability, right? For making sure that we adopt more of sustainable production and consumption patterns. We basically adhere to those principles of sustainability in our daily living. That consumerism is reduced, right? That is what the very objective of Mission Life is all about. Now, in this particular conference, circularity has been given a focus. By circularity, what I mean to say is circular economy. Why? Primarily because of three reasons. Okay, why circularity can be or should be adopted as a model. What are the reasons? The very first is that it promotes inclusive economic growth. You would ask how? See, once I'm adopting circular economy, I'm focusing upon the recycling and the reuse. So we'll come up with more of these jobs in the recycling, what we call as the green jobs. Green jobs in the recycling sector, in the reuse sector. And definitely what would happen is that a lot many people who are poor, who are at the low socio-economic backgrounds, they would join this particular sector. Next, we have cleaner air. Yes, because since we'll focus more upon the recycling aspect, what we'll have is less of production of new products. And therefore, the energy intensity would reduce. The emissions which we are having through the productions, those would reduce. Next, we have the healthier population. Yes, because in the production processes, please understand, especially when we talk about the electronics or when we talk about those products which have a very high value addition, right? Especially when we talk about, let's say we are producing a laptop, or let's say we are producing an iPad, whatever. So the process is very intensive. It requires a lot of energy, right? It requires a lot of products. So because of that, in the whole supply chain, in the production process, there is a release of toxins, right? And if we are focusing more upon the recycling aspect, it is but obvious that there would be reduced emission of these toxins, and therefore that would promote healthier populations. That is how you can, in a flowchart, you can explain about the importance of adopting circular economy. Now, when we talk about India, why there is a need, I've already told you that right now we are having a linear economy model where we are focusing upon production of that particular commodity, using it, and then disposing it. We are not talking about the reversal. We're not talking about the aspect of reuse or recycling. Whereas in circular economy, the focus is on these aspects of reducing, on reusing, on recycling. These are the 3 R's: reducing, reusing, and recycling. And therefore, this is a much more sustainable way of production and consumption. I hope it is clear. So we had this Swachh Bharat Abhiyan Urban 2.0, where the focus was on almost 1100 cities, and we have basically made them free from dump sites. But if you want to truly realize the vision of garbage free cities, right, we'll have to focus upon all the urban centers in the country. We cannot have a kind of an skewed approach. We cannot have an approach where we are focusing only upon certain urban centers and we are not giving enough importance to the others. Even the tier 2 or tier 3 cities need adequate attention because they are emerging as new centers of production and consumption. And because of that, a lot of waste is being generated in the tier 2 and tier 3 cities also. So we need to give equal importance to all the cities, almost 5,000 plus urban centers. I hope it is clear, right? Because linear economy, it is something which deals with the aspects of depletion of natural resources, overflowing landfills, and high emissions of greenhouse gases, right? And also other harmful gases. Then we have the aspects of circular economy, which focus upon minimizing the waste and making sure that whatever waste is produced, it is properly recycled and reused and again made a part of the value chains. I hope it is clear. Now, how can we manage different waste streams? In this article itself, the author has talked about 3 waste streams. The very first is organic waste. The second is plastic and dry waste. The third is construction and demolition waste, right? So these 3 are very important areas. Adequate policy measures and attention should be given to these 3 dimensions. Now, when we talk about the organic waste, I've already told you that a major chunk of the overall waste generated in the urban centers is the organic waste. Over 50% of the municipal waste is that of organic in nature. How it can be managed? See, we have a lot of organic waste which we generate in our kitchens, right? We can have the procedures of composting. See, if it is not possible in the home, we can have a mechanism where the community takes the ownership and does the composting. Either it can be household composting or it can be the community composting. Now, why composting is important? Because once you do composting, you have a lot of organic content, right, which is produced, what we call as a waste. Once it is degraded, we get a lot of organic content, and that increases the soil organic carbon. The organic carbon present in the soil, it is enhanced if we apply that particular compost. Also, it increases the moisture retention capacity of the soil. Right now, what we are witnessing because of the ill effects of climate change is that because of high soaring temperatures, the soil is becoming dry. So the moisture content is reducing. Therefore, adequate application of the compost which is produced can be applied, and therefore the overall moisture content would also be enhanced. Next, we have biomethanation. Again, very important process. Now, in this biomethanation, it is an anaerobic process that is without oxygen, and we basically get 2 byproducts. One is that of the CH4, what we call as a biogas, right, and a mix of other gases, combustible gases, and then we have the waste, solid waste. Now, this waste again can be used as a biofertilizer. So we have these 2 things, biomethanation, right? We have the waste and then we basically process it anaerobically without oxygen, and we have the biogas and the organic waste which can be used as a kind of fertilizer. Then we have the compressed biogas plants convert wet waste into the green fuel, what we call as the CBG, right? Green fuel in terms of we can blend with the conventional fuel. You must have heard that right now what we are doing is we are blending it blending it with the conventional fuel, right? Next, we have electricity. How you can have electricity? If we basically go with the combustion of the biogas, we will have energy, and then we can basically go with the production of electricity also. Next is that of the plastic and dry waste, which is something which is which is becoming a very important concern these days, primarily because of the unsustainable levels of production of plastics. About 1/3 of the urban waste is dry waste, and major chunk of that dry waste is nothing but the plastic, right? And it is the most problematic aspect. Effective management depends upon the segregation at source. Yes, very, very important. Segregation at source is something which has been the pain point of the whole process with respect to the waste management. Because the very first step of managing the waste is segregation, which we are not effectively doing. And that is what is leading to the mix of all waste. And sometimes it gets burnt, it gets, degraded. And ultimately, we have the mixing of the waste, which is not a good process, which is not the optimal process. Therefore, there has to be adequate segregation at the source itself. Next, we have the aspects of material recovery facilities, MRFs, material recovery facilities, where whatever waste you have, the dry waste, we have a lot of processes which are involved, and you decide that which component of that particular waste can be recovered and reused again. So there have to be proper facilities for that. And the government is definitely investing in that aspect. But again, we still don't have those robust facilities which have all that value chains within itself. Then we have the refused derived fuels. Refused derived fuels. Now, this is something which is important. See, we have a lot of dry waste. Now, in the dry waste, we have some component which is combustible. For example, we have the textile, we have the paper, we have the wood, and some of the waste which is non-combustible in nature. Let's say we have the glass. Let's say we have, other material which is non-combustible. Now, if you segregate the combustible and non-combustible, and then once you use this particular combustible material, and you can come up with the refused derived fuels. And this RDF can be used in various industries as a material which can be used to provide the heat source. For example, in cement industries. For example, in aluminium industries, in steel industries. Definitely a component. देखिए, एक तो है conventional supply. You already have a conventional supply of electricity and heat. So if you add this aspect of RDFs, definitely you can have a more sustainable pattern. But entrepreneurship, scaling this, at to that level is missing right now. We are not focusing upon the aspects of scaling the RDF based fuels. Next, we have the construction and demolition waste, especially looking at the kind of hyperactivity we are witnessing in the construction domain. It is very much important that we focus upon the adequate management of the waste which is generated. For example, let's say a particular building is being demolished. So what usually happens is it is thrown, the waste is thrown. If we can use that particular waste, for example, we have gravel, or we have the broken bricks, the fragments of the bricks, that can be used in the road construction, that can be used in any other construction, right? So adequate facilities for the recycling must be there in the C&D waste, which is construction and demolition waste. Around 12 million tons annually is being produced, major contribution to urban pollution and visual degradation. Yes, you must have seen those blue sheets which are there, which cover the construction sites. It is primarily because they are mandated to cover that. But in many places, right, it is not being followed. And ultimately what happens is that whenever you are doing the construction, whenever you are having all these stuffs at one place, the bricks and mortar and gravel and everything, it leads to a lot of urban pollution. The particulate matters 2.5 or particulate matter 10, they basically have a very debilitating and negative consequence on the overall environmental air which is there, right? And visual degradation. Because of that, you must have seen we have the smog. We have the smoke plus fog. Because of that, the haziness is there, and the visibility, it gets significantly reduced. So this also leads to the visual degradation. Much of it can be recycled or reused as a low-cost raw material. Right? I've already told we can use the gravel, we can use the fragments of the bricks. What has been the policy framework? The government has already come with the construction and demolition waste management rules of 2016. Recently, we had the environment C&D waste management rules of 2025 which would be effective from 1st of April 2026. This would also focus upon making sure that whatever waste we are generating with respect to the construction, it is properly managed. That is the three aspects of the waste which the author has talked about. Now, What are the different policies, rules, and institutional frameworks? The government has come up with different rules spanning from the municipal solid waste management, then the e-waste management, the plastic waste management. For example, the government has come up with the solid waste management rules, and with the time, it has also been several times it has been amended in order to make sure that it is in line with the urban demands. It focuses upon proper segregation. I told you, segregation at source is something which is a very important component. It focuses upon the processing of the waste, the urban waste, right? Primary processing, secondary processing, recycling, and scientific disposal. Then we have the plastic waste management rules. Now, this focuses upon one of the very important aspects, which I've already told you, which is the extended producer responsibility, where the producer, whoever produces the good, or any commodity, that person is liable for the whole life cycle management of that particular good or commodity. Primarily the end of life management, where the focus is upon the disposal, the recycling of that particular commodity. Then we have the e-waste management rules, which focus upon the collection, recycling, and setting up of authorized facility. ये बहुत important है. When I'm talking about the authorized facilities, I'm talking about those facilities which can basically recover the material. Material recovery can be done properly, right? So whatever the discarded computers, laptops, or mobile or smartphones you have, it is then properly fragmented, broken into different components, and then whatever the material you can recover, you recover that. And we have a lot of these important precious metals which are there. We have platinum, right? We have silver in these printed circuit boards, PCBs, in that particular equipment itself. So definitely we have to focus upon those facilities. Then we have the construction and demolition. I've already talked about that. Government is focusing upon this in order to make this particular sector of construction free from waste. And whatever waste is coming, that should be utilized for other activities. Circular economy emphasis for whole of the year of 2025, the government has in one way or the other, through different policy measures, focused upon this aspect, and it has tried to embed, to make sure that these principles of circular economy, they are basically infused into different aspects, prioritizing the prevention, reduction, reuse, recycling, and recovery over disposal. That is what you have to understand. What has been the role of Swachh Bharat Mission? So as I already told you, Swachh Bharat Mission Urban 2.0. It has been focusing upon one very important objective, which is garbage-free cities. And how you can achieve garbage-free cities? By providing the material recovery facility, all right? Material recovery facilities. So in these facilities, what happens is we recover the material which is of importance, and then that can be used and made a part of the supply chains. Then we have composting. I already told you, composting is something which helps to retain the organic content of the soil in order to make sure that the moisture content is there. Then we have waste to energy. You must have seen we have a lot of these incinerators where the combustible waste is segregated, it is taken, and heat is produced through waste to energy plants. We have one in Okla, right? So once that energy is produced, that can be used in various industries. You have the coal industry or any industry, right? Then we have improved collection and processing of that particular waste. Then we had one of the very important schemes, which is Gobardhan scheme. Now, this focuses upon the compressed biogas, production of compressed biogas, where we basically look at the organic waste as a very precious resource, which can be used to produce the compressed biogas, right? The scheme promotes waste to wealth, biogas, and organic waste processing units. So it tries to establish those waste processing units, which can then lead to the production of the biogas. Legacy dump sites remediation. Yes. So we have, as I told you in the beginning, we had these dump sites in Ghazipur, in Okla, in Balswa, especially in the Delhi area. Now, what the government has been doing is it is focusing upon different techniques. For example, biomining. Biomining kya hota hai? That you use microorganisms. You use microorganisms on that particular site, and on that basis, what happens is that the microorganisms degrade that particular waste, and what you are left with is the important materials. It can be a metal, it can be any other element which can be used again in the overall supply chain. So this is biomining. We have different methods, and that all those methods can be applied at these places. The government of Delhi has been, it tried in an experiment this particular biomining. So that can be easily done to reduce the environmental and health hazards. Now, why resource recovery potential is very, very important? Because it is benefiting at two fronts. One is the economic value. By whatever amount you are getting, whatever thing you are getting, let's suppose we are having the bio CNG. You are having the bio-CNG, it has an economic value. This can be blended with the conventional fuels. Or let's say you recover a particular mineral in the form of platinum, or let's say you recover silver, right? It has an economic value. So definitely, if we focus upon circular economy, we are in a way boosting the overall economic returns. Next, we have jobs and informal sector linkages. Yes, because if we formalize the whole sector, right now the dominance is of the informal players, and in the informal setup, what the condition of the people, the rag pickers, is it's very suboptimal, right? They're not having proper social security benefits. So if you formalize the whole setup, what is going to happen is it is going to induce greater confidence in the investors. It is going to make the whole process very efficient. Formalizing the informal sector workers, enhancing the worker safety. Yes, worker safety, here I'm talking about the occupational hazards. बहुत important है. Because they deal with these hazardous chemicals, hazardous materials. So proper setups need to be there. Personal protective equipments. अगर आप formalize कर देंगे, if you will formalize the whole setup, what is going to happen is you would be mandated to provide these personal protective equipments to these workers working in the industries. Next, we have what are the key challenges in the circular waste management. Challenges kya hai? Bhai, everything looks very hunky-dory, very good. But how to implement this at the ground level? The very first is segregation at the source. Yes. Most of these rules, be it the municipal solid waste or the e-waste or the other rules which have been there, the plastic waste, the very emphasis of all these rules has been on the segregation part. Ye sabse important hai. And this begins in our home itself. Whatever waste we are generating, especially in our homes, we don't segregate it as dry waste or organic waste. If we start doing it, it's going to be very easy for the next player to basically segregate and make sure to utilize the maximum benefit from that particular waste. So we need to start from the very first stage, because once the waste gets mixed, once it is out of the residential areas, then it is very difficult to segregate. So it has to be the segregation at source, because this has been the biggest bottleneck for recycling and resource recovery, right? Next is infrastructure gaps. Even if we have the government coming up with a lot of policies, coming up with a lot of these authorized centers for the recycling, but still the number of these centers, or the capacity of these centers to deal with the waste, it is still very less as compared to the amount of waste which is being generated. So there has to be a proportion. There has to be the proportionate waste dealing centers, waste recycling centers, material recovery centers, composting units and recycling plants, quality and markets. ये भी बहुत important है. See, there are quality perception issues. I'll give you a real life example. Let's say you are thinking to buy an iPhone, right? And you have set a budget for yourself. Now, if I were to give you an option, कि भाई, we have this refurbished iPhone, sir, ये लेंगे आप? You would say, no, I'll definitely go with the new iPhone, because there is a mental setup, right? Even if I'm at your position, I would think the same. So there are quality perception issues. We don't have the trust in the refurbishing aspect, in the recycled instruments, especially when we are talking about the electronic equipments. So there has to be a focus upon making sure that whatever recycling we are doing, whatever refurbishing we are doing, it is to that level. It is to that level of the new product. Only then people would be inclined to buy those products. I hope it is clear. Recycled products, they have quality perception issues and weak market linkages. Even if you are having a very good quality product, you're not able to link with the market. आपको demand से match करना पड़ेगा. People don't even have the idea with respect to that what kind of refurbished products are available in the market. So they need to be told about this. Then we have the EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility. Implementation is patchy. Though this is mandated, कि भाई producers को करना पड़ेगा, but they exploit the loopholes. There is a nexus which is there at the local levels, nexus between these producers and the local officials and the elected leaders. And because of that, there is corruption also which is involved. So the implementation is really patchy. Stronger compliance has to be there. Poor integration of waste rules. Yes. See, the government, especially at the central level, we have this concurrent subject. Please understand, very important point. And the central government is coming up with these rules, which has to be implemented at the local level, at the district level. The state government have their own laws with respect to the urban places, right? Their bylaws, their building codes. Now, how to basically have a proper coordination when we talk about these central laws or rules and regulations and these state laws? There is sometimes a mismatch. You must have seen that right now we are having a lot of development authorities. आपने देखा होगा in urban places, right? Ideally, the function with respect to the development in urban places is it should be with the municipalities, because that is what the very objective of 74th Constitutional Amendment was, right? But what we are witnessing is that these development authorities have been constituted, who are being handled, who are being managed by the officials. आपकी city में, in your city itself, you must be having the development authorities managing the areas, managing the urban planning and everything. The Jal boards, what we call these bodies as parastatal bodies. So the functions have been taken, functions of the municipalities have been taken by these bodies. So there are a lot of issues in defining the jurisdiction also, that who has the power to implement what, right? Next, we have the financial constraints. You may come up with a lot of good policies in place. You may talk about circular economy and all these principles, but that requires funding, that requires money. So from where the money would come, that is also one of the very important issues, because urban local bodies ke baad, they don't have their enough resources. According to the economic survey of 2017-18, very important data. What it says is that the own revenue sources of the urban local bodies in the country, the own revenue sources matlab, it means that whatever revenue they are generating on their own, it is less than 1% of the overall GDP. Nothing. So we are having a lot of urban places, but the amount of money which they have is minuscule, and they are utterly dependent upon the state governments and the central governments for grants. So adequate financial resources also must be there. What should be the way forward? Now, there have been different initiatives. We have the greater awareness among the masses. Yes, people need to be told about the importance of recycling and reuse. This is the very first step. For example, we had the Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, right? Why? Because people were told through different IEC campaigns, information, education, and communication campaigns. People need to be made very clear. They need to realize this importance of waste, recycling, and reuse. It is very, very important. And we have been having the urban conclaves focusing upon the urban rejuvenation through circularity. India has led the Cities Coalition for Circularity, C3 initiative, very important, can be important for the prelims. And the very platform is for the knowledge sharing, the best practices sharing. As I told you, we have to focus upon the behavioral campaigns. Nudge is very important. Nudge campaigns. Bhai, aap logon ko bataiye. You tell people that if you adopt these practices, it's going to be more sustainable, right? Acceptance of recycled products. Tell them that if the quality matches, if the quality of the refurbished item matches to that of the new product, definitely you should use it. Realistic and scalable solutions. Yes, this is again very important, because the scale with which you have to recycle things, it is too much. If you are thinking about the recycling of the waste of a particular city, right? Or let's say a small city or a big city, you need to have solutions to that scale. You need to have the facility which can manage the waste which is being generated. Scalable solutions hone chahiye and realistic solutions. So again, we cannot have, right now we are having a linear model which is not sustainable, which is increasing the overall costs of the goods and services, goods and products and commodities, and ultimately it is affecting the poor. But more than that, it is affecting the environment. And this is something which can also be linked to the tipping points, right? We have certain tipping points which, if once breached, the situation would be irreparable. We will not be able to come back to the normal position, right? So that is how we'll have to focus. Even the Conference of Party 30 has focused upon minimizing the waste. And over here, the circular economy plays a very important role. Let's have a mains practice question. Urban India faces a growing crisis of municipal solid waste. Highlight the magnitude of urban waste, the numbers which we discussed. So the question is specifically asking about that, and discuss the need of adopting circular economy, the importance, along with the challenges faced. Also suggest pragmatic solutions. 15 marks, 250 words. Do write a particular answer on this question. And yes, if you like this initiative, do not forget to press the like button, and also let us know in the comments. And yes, make sure that you write, because this is the starting of the year. If you start from now, definitely it's going to help you a lot. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to powering India's tech future. Now, there is one very important area which we are focusing, which is that of the critical minerals. It is primarily because we are having a rapid progress with respect to new and emerging technologies. For example, we have the development of artificial intelligence, machine learning, defense technology, space exploration, renewable energy technologies, right? And in all these domains, we have the critical requirement of specific minerals, what we call as the critical minerals. But there is a scenario attached to it. First is that we have not invested enough when we talk about the exploration of these minerals. Second, we are utterly dependent on certain countries, specifically China. Now, first of all, let me talk about critical minerals. I already told you that they form the very bedrock, the very backbone of these equipments, telecom equipments, renewable energy technology, battery storage systems. If I were to talk about the rare earth elements, we often confuse the difference between critical minerals and rare earth elements. See, rare earth elements are a subset of critical minerals. And in rare earth elements, we have the rare earth magnates, which is again very important component, rare earth magnates. According to a particular data, India has doubled the imports of rare earths magnate from China. And right now, what China is asking is that we have to give an undertaking that we will only use these rare earth magnets which we are importing from you only for a specific purpose. So on one hand, we have the economic issues. We are dependent. We are paying a lot of price. On the other hand, we have the strategic issues, strategic concerns. China can use it for its own advantage at any point of time, right? There is one particular magnet which is neodymium iron boron, NdFeB, which forms a very critical component of battery storage systems, right? Rare earth magnets, high performing magnets, what we call. And we have been importing more than 90% of this particular magnet from China. You can understand the condition, the dependency which we have. So in this particular article, what the author is trying to emphasize on the point that we should basically incorporate the private players into this domain. We should make sure that they have significant place as far as the exploration is concerned. Because there's one very important data which is attached. It is not that we don't have enough reserves. According to the US Geological Survey, India is the third largest country in the world with respect to these critical minerals. Rare earth elements, we are the third largest country in the world. We have a lot of reserves of these. But they have not been explored properly by the Indian authorities. And therefore, we haven't even exploited them. So what the author is trying to focus ultimately is that first of all, we don't have enough investments in the research and development. Second, we don't have proper exploration, primarily because we have not incorporated the private entities. We'll go through the article, then we'll talk about what critical minerals are all about, why they are very important for India, what have been the steps taken by the government, what should be the way forward, what are the challenges comprehensively. Now, what the author says is that US-led PEX Silica, very, very important. Right? So this can be asked in the UPSC prelims. Initiative to secure the supply chains in critical minerals, energy, semiconductors, and AI. So if the question is, what is PEX Silica? It is primarily to make sure that we have secured supply chains with respect to the energy aspect, the renewable energy, the semiconductors, and the AI. The 9 member countries do not include India. So we are not a member of this particular initiative. Initiative is implicitly directed at countering China. Each of the 9 member countries, US, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, UK, Netherlands, Israel, and UAE and Australia, bring something to the table either in terms of high technology, capability, or resources. Either they are technologically intensive or they are bringing some resources, which we in India don't have as of now. India isn't even among the guests, which include Canada, resource rich, and Taiwan, semiconductors, which is the mother of semiconductor industry. Taiwan is a country which has the very base of semiconductors. This is a result of India not giving enough attention to the high technology and minerals over the years. This is again very important data. India spends just 0.65% of GDP on the research and development, and this percentage has been largely unchanged for the last 2 decades. The US and China spend roughly 3% and 2.5% of GDP respectively on research and development. South Korea and Israel spend close to 5% on their GDP with respect to the R&D. It is hardly surprising, therefore, that India has not emerged as a product or innovation center, primarily because we have not invested a lot in the innovation aspect, in the research and development. The only sector, but we have one sector which has outperformed the others, that is the aspect of the space. In the space domain, we are doing very good. We have been the carriers of a lot of foreign satellites, right? A similar story of stagnation is in the mineral sector. India has one of the finest geologies in the world, comparable to that of Australia. So never have this perception that we don't have enough reserves. The geology is very good, but we haven't explored. India is a massive importer of oil and gas. 90% of our needs comes from the overseas. It is also a huge importer of gold. Almost 100% of gold is imported. Copper ore, 95%. It even imports apparently abundant minerals like coal and bauxite. We import a lot of coal, primarily for the production of steel, coking coal, right? Bauxite. In critical minerals like lithium, the import dependence is almost 100%. Mining contributes just 2% of GDP. Just 2% of GDP. Like in R&D, its share hasn't moved over time. In countries of comparable geology, which has the same geology, the number is almost of 8 to 10%. The bigger part of India's mineral wealth is lying deep underground, unexplored and undiscovered. So what should be done? See, the Geological Survey of India doesn't have the adequate capacity, according to the author. Therefore, we need to incorporate more of private players. It needs a different policy approach. The government cannot be the sole explorer. The private sector has to step in, and the private sector will only step if the government allows it to monetize any discovery freely without government interventions. That is what the perspective of the author is. But yes, one thing is very clear. We need the incorporation of private players, right? Now, let's talk about critical minerals. Ki bhai, what do we mean by critical minerals? See, there is no specific definition of critical mineral. Ye aapko samajhna padega. That we cannot have one particular definition of critical mineral, and different countries on the basis of their own criticality, importance of that particular mineral, they have their own list of critical minerals. The list of critical minerals for Russia would be different from India, would be different from US, right? It depends upon that particular country. It also depends upon the time frame. For instance, as it changes with time. The criticality of a particular element in 1950, let's say for US, was too much. But now it is not that critical as of now, right? As of now, there would be some other element, some other material which would be more critical for the US. So it changes with time. That is what you have to understand. As I already told you, the rare earth element, they are a subset of the critical minerals. These metallic or non-metallic have two characteristics. How do we define the criticality? Why that particular material or mineral is critical, important, primarily based upon two factors. First is essentiality, economic importance with respect to the new and emerging domain, clean technologies, defense, space, right, medical sciences. So if you have a particular mineral which is important in different domains, whose demand is too much, so therefore that is an aspect of essentiality. Next is that of supply chain risks. Whether you have enough reserves of it. If you have enough reserves of it, are you processing it? Have you explored it? Or you are still critically dependent on the other countries? What we have for India, we are, for our needs with respect to the critical minerals, we are almost 100% dependent on different countries around the world, primarily China. So that these two factors combined, this essentiality and the supply chain risk, we have the aspects of criticality of minerals. I hope it is clear. Examples, we have antimony, beryllium, bismuth, cobalt, copper, lithium, right? Lithium is a critical mineral, but it is not a rare earth element. That is how you differentiate. So this also includes the rare earth elements, the critical minerals. Top producers are China. We'll talk about this. Chile, Indonesia, Congo. Congo is one of the largest producers of cobalt. A question was also there in the UPSC prelims. Australia and South Africa. Importance of critical minerals for India. Why it is really important for a country like India? We are focusing upon the energy transition. We are focusing upon the net zero goals. Prime Minister has already talked about net zero by 2070, Panch Amrit, nationally determined contributions. So we are adopting cleaner forms of energy, solar energy, turbines, wind turbines, and all these things, batteries, all these things require in one form or the other these minerals, lithium, copper, beryllium, and rare earth. I already told you about the rare earth magnets, which form the very backbone of these battery storage systems. So therefore, it is very important. The government has been coming up with a lot of schemes, for example, the National Electric Mobility Mission. So in order to make sure that we facilitate the transition to a cleaner form of energy, so we need all these critical minerals. Next, we have strategic and defense security. They are used in the missile guidance systems, in the radars, in the jet engines, in the drones, in the precision equipments. We have the rare earth magnets which are used. We have the specialty alloys which are used in various defense platforms. And if you want to have a kind of the state of the art defense platform, which what the US has or Israel has, you need a substantial supply of critical minerals and rare earth elements. Industrial competitiveness and manufacturing. We have been coming up with the Make in India, PLI schemes, semiconductor mission, electronic development, smartphone development. Why? And every component in these equipments, it requires in one form or the other these critical minerals. We already talked about the aspects of circular economy. We have platinum, we have silver, which is used in the smartphones. And this is not something which is easily available. We have to import most of these components from different countries around the world, right? So that is what you'll have to understand. We are focusing upon the 5G, 6G. We are focusing upon building new telecom equipments, coming up with more new standards with respect to telecom standards. The data centers with respect to artificial intelligence. You need big data centers, cloud storage systems. Every hardware requires some or the other critical minerals, right? Supply chain resilience. The global supply chains with respect to the critical minerals, they are very narrow. They're concentrated. First of all, not every country has reserves of these critical minerals. Second, even if countries have reserves, they have not explored them. They have not exploited, for example, India. And therefore, the processing of these critical minerals or rare earth elements, it is very sparse. It is very less in the world. Only few countries have a dominance with respect to the processing aspect. If I were to give you the data, when we talk about the overall combined rare earth elements, the production aspect, almost 65 to 70% is dominated by China. And this is just the production aspect. When we talk about the processing of rare earth element, almost 85% of the processing, 85 to 90% of the processing takes place in China. That is what the dominance of China is. So the supply chains are very constricted. So we need to diversify the supply chain. We need to have more players in the market from which we can source the material. So that is also very important. Highly concentrated. Circular economy and urban mining. We already discussed in the very first article that since we are having scarcity of goods, we are having a lot of production which is going on, we need to adopt. There's a imperative of adopting circular economy. And therefore, the recovery of critical minerals would be there, and this would reduce the import dependence. Global geopolitical influence. If a country has a good base with respect to critical minerals, definitely its importance among the committee of nations, among the group of nations would enhance. US may not have much of the reserves, but you has the capacity, the technological capacity. China is also developing substantial technological capacity in addition to already having a lot of production, a lot of reserves. So this is in one way or the other would give you the strategic leverage. That is what we are trying to tell you. Now look at this particular infographic. This just because it can be important from the prelims perspective. Let's talk about Canada. So it has a lot of reserves for cesium, which requires in medical imaging. Potash, you must be aware, we have these rare earth magnets. They're used in the MRI machines. So in medical domain also they're used, right? In lasers, optics, very important. Potash. Then we have US beryllium, almost 65% is there in US. We have helium, cryogenics is used in cryogenics, Chile, rhenium. Then we have Brazil, niobium. We have South Africa, platinum, chromium. We have Spain, strontium, used in ceramic magnets. Then we have Russia, palladium, almost 40% used in catalytic converters. We have cobalt in Congo. It is almost 70% of the world's reserves are there in Congo. Then we have Australia, lithium. Look at the numbers for China. You would find each and every of these rare earth elements in China. That is what the dominating position of China is, right? Now, what have been the steps taken by the government of India with respect to critical minerals? The very first is that we came in January 2025 with National Critical Minerals Mission. Government is thinking to invest more than 35,000 crores in 7 years with respect to making the resilient value chains with respect to critical minerals. Also focusing upon the recycling of the critical minerals. Investment in various domains across the supply chain of these critical minerals. The Mines and Minerals Development and Regulation Act was amended in 2023 and a Part D was inserted where certain critical minerals, the exclusive powers with respect to granting the license, it was given to the Union government, and a new Part D was there which was basically constituted where the government would tell that which of all the critical minerals can be explored and the licenses would be given by the government, right? Then we have the Geological Survey of India, the most important authority with respect to the exploration part. Hundreds of exploration projects have been commissioned. For example, you must be aware of the Riyasi, where we had substantial lithium reserves. Custom duties on waste and scrap have been removed, whatever the material is coming. right? The waste is coming. We can basically have the facilities for recycling and we can recover the waste, right? Then we have the Kabil Khanij Bidesh India Limited, focusing upon the overseas critical mineral assets, coming into partnership with different countries around the world. For example, we have come into partnership with lithium with Argentina with respect to lithium, right? Overseas critical mineral assets. Then we have global partnership and supply chain diversification. We have been coming in a lot of MOUs, memorandum of understanding, with different countries. It has been made a part of the comprehensive economic partnership agreement with Australia, what we call as ECTA, right? And also we have agreements with different countries around the world which are rich in these sources, MOUs. We are also having the Mineral Security Partnership, a US-led initiative to secure the supply chains of critical minerals. Then we have technology and AI-assisted exploration. AI is now being used, machine learning is now being used to look at those places which may have a potent source of these critical minerals. What are the challenges? The very first is that we are critically dependent on the imports. There's high import dependence, and that too on one specific country, which is China, with which we don't share good relations. We have antagonistic relations. There is acrimony which is there. So there are economic and strategic risks. China at any point of time can basically deny the supply, which it has done to the US, right? Limited exploration and technological gaps. Even, see, we already have the Geological Survey of India, but this does not have the adequate capacity. That is what the author is also talking about. That why don't you incorporate or include the private sector? That is going to boost the overall, the potential of these reserves being found. And therefore, we can definitely go with the exploitation of these resources. Lack of investments have been there. It requires private investments. Environment and social concerns. Yes, in many of these places, what the GSI, the Geological Survey of India, has said that the reserves are there in deep forested areas where you have a lot of tribal people, and they have resisted the mining of these particular minerals. Then we have regulatory and clearance delays. There have been long timelines. And if you have red tapeism which is involved, a process which takes a lot of time, then this discourages the private and foreign investments, obviously. Then weak recycling ecosystem. We do not have the adequate capacity to recycle. That is what we talked in the very first article itself. There have to be the material recovery facilities, MRFs, adequate material recovery facilities, so that we can extract the critical minerals from the used electronic items, right? So we have to focus upon these aspects. These are the challenges. What should be the way forward? The very first is strengthening the domestic exploration. The need of the hour. Use different technologies, be it artificial intelligence, remote sensing, fast track auctioning. If you have a particular place where there is a possibility of a particular reserve, then definitely exploit that particular reserve, making sure that adequate social and environmental clearances are obtained. Then we have encouraging the private sector participation, what the author is talking about. Develop processing and refining capacity. Just producing is not enough, because the processing component of the critical minerals, it is very intensive. It is very technologically intensive. You need a lot of technologies in place to process a particular critical mineral. It's not something which is easy. That's the reason you only have limited countries, and specifically China, having a command, having an expertise in the processing aspect. So we need to focus upon the processing aspect also. Value chain control, mineral processing. We can come up with these mineral processing parks, promote recycling and urban mining, battery, e-waste, scrap recycling, strengthening the extended producer responsibility, secure the overseas assets and mineral diplomacy, expand the role of Kabul, come into partnerships with other countries, not just for the sake of exploitation of that particular mineral, but come in a partnership of co-development, collaboration. See, India has a very good image in Africa, and Africa has a lot of these minerals. Why not come in partnership? Because China, the initial perception which these African countries had for China was very good, but the Chinese authorities, Chinese enterprises have exploited a lot of these critical minerals, and no advantage has been given to, or no benefit has been given to the local population. So therefore, India can be a partner in this. Ensure sustainable and responsible mining. Enforce the guidelines. When we talk about the environmental, social and governance guidelines, it is a form of, we have the Environment Impact Assessment, EIA. So this is one of the core component of the environmental part of ESG. There are certain guidelines which are to be adhered. The environmental, social and governance guidelines. And we have EIA as that of the environment aspect. We also have the SIA, Social Impact Assessment. adopt the best global practices which have been going on, sustainable practices around the world, boost research, innovation, and substitution, invest in research and development. We have a very minuscule research which is there. So increase that particular amount, support the centers of excellence. We can have centers of excellence in difference. For example, we have ISM Dhanbad. Why not we create a center of excellence in ISM Dhanbad or any other institute which deals with the mining aspect? So again, see, critical minerals are the very backbone of new and emerging technologies. So we really cannot afford to have less of importance in this particular area. We need to invest properly, and the government has come up with the national critical mineral missions. But again, we need to have a more broad policy architecture so that we have a kind of a sovereignty. We are not critically dependent on the other countries. And for that, we'll have to explore our own resources, and a particular framework needs to be created where private sector can definitely make a partner in this particular exploration aspect. I hope it is clear. Let's have a mains practice question. Discuss the significance of critical minerals in the context of India's energy transition and industrial growth. Also examine the challenges associated with the availability and suggest measures to ensure a sustainable supply. 15 marks, 250 words. Do write an answer to this particular question. Let's go to the next section. Coming to the simplified section, we have the very first topic which talks about the reduced exports from India to different countries around the world, primarily the US. See, in August last year, we had the US imposing a lot of tariffs on the goods which were being imported into the US from India. And we have a kind of perception that it is primarily because of these increased tariffs and anti-dumping duties that what we have seen is that the overall cumulative exports have reduced. But according to an RTI application which was filed by the Indian Express, they have got certain information with respect to the meeting of Board of Trade, which was chaired by the Union Commerce Minister. And we'll talk about this, what this particular board is all about. What it says is that it's not just the tariffs imposed by the US, rather there are other reasons also. The very important reason, for example, is the infrastructure deficit. We do not have the adequate infrastructure with respect to facilitating exports. For example, in the form of the containers, for example, in the form of the depots. We do not have the adequate testing facilities. You just imagine that if US is importing a particular good or a commodity, or EU is importing a good or commodity, they would naturally have their own standards. It should meet the requirements of those particular jurisdictions. So if we do not even have the testing facilities, how we'll be able to judge whether the particular good matches the quality or not? Then there is this particular issue of regulatory constraints. There are a lot of regulatory constraints which are there, in the form of red tapeism, a lot of requirements. The input cost is too much. The input cost with respect to the raw materials is much more, and therefore the ultimate cost, the final cost of the product, it rises to unsustainable levels, and therefore the exporters are not able to export. Because in countries like US, we already have other countries which are giving the products at better prices, for example, Vietnam or Bangladesh. So these are some of the issues. Now, these type of articles are really important to find out what the issues are in a particular sector. So we'll go through that, and we'll also talk about export promotion scheme, the mission, and we'll also talk about one very important concept of countervailing duties and the anti-dumping duties. It's not just the high US tariffs that are hurting the exports. Costlier raw materials, shortage of testing facilities to ensure the products meet the global quality standards, and lack of adequate shipping containers are all leading to the loss of competitiveness of goods and exports. Response to right to information application has said. These challenges were flagged by the exporters in a meeting of the Board of Trade chaired by the Union Minister of Commerce and Industry, the BOT, and that is how you also get to know what BOT is all about. There can be a question in the prelims. Board of Trade is chaired by, or what Board of Trade is all about. The Board of Trade is an advisory body. It's an advisory body and suggests measures related to the foreign trade policy aspect and procedural simplifications. Let's say that I am an exporter and I am basically exporting to Germany, a particular product. So what are the procedures which are involved? There has to be, the Board of Trade would discuss about the simplification of these procedures. The BOT meeting happened in the backdrop of slowing exports due to the steep US tariffs of 50% and both countries failing to conclude a trade deal till the end of 25. The steep US tariffs, which came into effect on August 27, have dampened the exports, triggered cancellations in orders and delayed payments. There are also worries that these could result in orders moving to its competitors such as Bangladesh, Vietnam and China. Now, once US has imposed a lot of tariffs, it is but obvious that the final price of the commodity which is being imported from India would be much higher as compared to being imported from Bangladesh or any other country. So the importers in the US would be more inclined to get product from these countries, right? This is one of the very important issues. Labor intensive goods, however, risk losing the market share as shipments of garments, footwear and other products are being replaced. New Delhi is aggressively pushing for new markets and has signed many of these free trade agreements. We already know that government is in that firefighting mode. It's having a lot of these CAPA, CECA agreements, free trade agreements with different countries. We recently concluded with Oman, right? Earlier we did with countries like UK. Tariffs and anti-dumping duty imposed by the US. Rajasthan said that the US tariffs have resulted in the cancellation of orders in the gems and jewelry sector, and that payments were also not coming. The Spices Board of India, please also read about this. The ministry, tell me the parent ministry in the comments. What is the parent ministry with respect to Spices Board? Said that the US tariffs had created a crisis with a 50% duty on oleoresin. Now, what is this oleoresin? Oleoresins help manufacture achieve flavor and aroma in the final products. So this is an intermediary good which is being used by the Spices Board in order to enhance the flavor, and the duties have been enhanced on this particular commodity. Even as the US tariffs left out the generic drugs, representatives from Goa flagged that pharma exports had been affected due to tariffs. The Seafood Exporters Association also flagged a significant drop in the exports to the US. Tirupur Exporters Association stated that the government should subsidize the difference in the US tariffs on India and those with its competitors. So again, the very objective of providing you this information is you can use these as an arguments and answers. You can quote that what are the issues in the overall export scenario when we talk about India, right? Engineering Export Promotion Council of India said that the Market Access Initiative was not available for the last 9 months, and now Market Access Initiative is a part of Export Promotion Mission. We'll talk about that, and would need to be expedited. EMP was announced in the budget last year, with the Commerce and Industry Ministry announcing the modalities of the scheme only on December 31st, 2025. Beyond US tariff, representatives also broached concerns over anti-dumping duties imposed by the US. Gujarat's representatives expressed the apprehension of impact on the exports due to the imposition of anti-dumping duty by the US. As the word says, dumping, right? So in anti-dumping duty, what happens is, let's say you have a particular producer in India, and that producer is basically, he is producing that particular commodity at very low prices, and then he is dumping that product deliberately at low prices and dumping that product in the other country. So right now, what the US would do is, it would impose a duty because it is not matching the prices which is being produced at the domestic level in the US, right? The difference, so that there can be a parity with the prices of what India is offering and what the domestic producer is offering in US, right? So that is what anti-dumping is all about. Then we have countervailing duties. There are countries which subsidize the production in different countries. For example, China does that quite often. US has imposed a lot of countervailing duties on China. So when the government subsidizes the production, obviously the prices would reduce. Now, if that particular producer is exporting to some different country, the different country can impose a countervailing duty to counter the subsidies. That is what the countervailing duties are all about. The Spices Board also raised concerns due to anti-dumping and countervailing duties. While the US has initiated most anti-dumping investigations against China, it has launched as many as 9 probes on industrial items exported from India since July last year. Then we have the issues of container shortages and lack of testing facilities. Assam's representatives said that tea exports from the state face hurdles due to shipping line levies for empty containers. Assam is a landlocked state. So therefore, there are issues with respect to the inland depots, right? There are levies which are imposed. So that is one of the primary concern in the context of the state being landlocked. Gujarat's representative also flagged the shortage of shipping containers and its impact on the exporters. There are lack of containers, adequate number of containers. Shortage of testing facilities were also flagged by the number of labor-intensive sectors. Uttarakhand said that there was no testing lab and exporters have to go to UP. So you are adding the distance to it. You are adding time and cost overruns. So therefore, you are making your product uncompetitive. There has to be testing facility in almost every of these export hubs. Testing labs are crucial for exporters to ensure product meet the international quality, safety and regulatory standards and prevent costly shipment rejections. The Seafood Exporters Association sought Marine Products Export Development Authority Tell me the parent ministry of MPDA. Very important question. And the National Accreditation Board for Testing and Calibration Laboratories accredited labs, since the Export Inspection Council did not have the requisite number of labs for testing. So what they are saying is, Seafood Exporters Association, that the Export Inspection Council does not have the adequate capacity. So give this task to the other bodies for the testing of different commodities which are being produced by different seafood manufacturers. ECI is the official export certification body of India, which ensures the quality and safety of producers exported from India, the products exported from India. Access to input material and regulatory costs. Well, MSME representative said prices of domestic raw materials remained 15 to 20% higher than the international prices. Prices of domestic raw material, they are quite high as compared to the international prices. What would the manufacturer do in this case? He or she would obviously import the raw material from the other country. It's much cheaper. So that is a very important concern. Representatives from the textile said that the energy costs for spinning and manufacturing were higher by around 15 to 20%, which is an input, the electricity costs, which needed to be compensated. An industry representative indicated that the Bureau of India's standards, BIS standards, were being made applicable even for the products which are being exported to the US and the European Union in line with their standards, as in respect of certain items, BIS standards are more complex. So the standards in certain items which are demanded by the US or other countries, they are lower. But we are following the BIS standards, which are much more restricted. So this should not be done. The Gem and Jewelry Export Promotion Council said that the restrictions on the gold, platinum and silver were a source of concern. The representatives from the ceramic industries in Morbi is in Gujarat, mentioned that district export committees need to be monitored since the meetings were not being held regularly. So at the district, at the very base, we have these districts council. So adequate meetings must be held. These district councils are the one which report to the state and then to the national level. So the meetings should be held regularly and the concerns should be addressed. MSMEs had challenged with the quality control orders, stating that the QC, quality control inspectors, must be facilitatory. We have these quality control orders which are the standards which are to be met, right? But we have, in certain cases, we have the inspectors who basically manage, who basically supervise or see these things. They are not facilitating. There are corruption cases which are involved, and they, in many cases, harass the exporters. So this is something which needs to be solved. Now, what is this particular export promotion mission? India's export performance has been central to the nation's economic strategy, helping generating employment, drive growth in manufacturing and services, and integrate Indian firms in the global value chain. To further enhance the overall export aspect, the government has come up with the export promotion mission. Especially for the MSMEs, first-time exporters, labor-intensive sectors, the government came up with the EPM, Export Promotion Mission. Announced in the Union Budget for 25-26, EPM focuses upon two aspects. The financial aspect, what we call as the Niryat Protsahan, right? Second is the non-financial aspect, which is Niryat Disha. So we have the financial interventions and non-financial interventions, especially for the MSMEs or first-time exporters, right? EPM will span 6 years with a total outlay of almost 25,000 crores, covering the financial year from 25-26 to financial year 30-31. That is what you'll have to focus upon, comprising different institutions. For example, we have the Department of Commerce, we have the Ministry of Micro, Small and Medium Enterprises, Ministry of Finance, we have the Export Promotion Councils, Community Boards, for example, the Spices Board. So that is how it is a multi-stakeholder initiative. The Directorate General of Foreign Trade will act as the implementing agency. Please remember, there can be a question in the prelims that who is implementing the Export Promotion Mission. It's the Directorate General of Foreign Trade, DGFT, operating a dedicated digital platform for end-to-end processes for the application to approval to disbursal. This is what you have to understand. We also have the difference between the anti-dumping duties and countervailing duties. I've already told, but again, dumping happens when a foreign country exports goods to another country at a price lower than the home market price. As I told you, so if an Indian exporter is exporting to the US, and if the prices in the US are too much and the Indian exporter has deliberately reduced the prices, then that is what the dumping is all about. And in order to compensate for it, US may impose tariffs, which we call as the anti-dumping duties. Cost of production, this hurts the domestic producers in the importing country. Anti-dumping duty is an additional tax imposed by the importing country to neutralize the unfair pricing, protect the domestic industry from injury. Key points. The very first is impose on product specific and country specific. Before it is imposed, an investigation is to be held, not automatic. It is allowed under the WTO rules. In India, it is investigated by the DGTR, Directorate General of Trade Remedies. It is under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Do remember. Then we have the countervailing duties, but before that we have subsidy. A subsidy is a financial support given by a government to domestic producers. Now, countervailing duties is imposed when foreign goods are subsidized by their respective governments. Such subsidies harm the domestic industry in the importing country. CVD offsets the advantage gained due to subsidies. Linked to the government subsidy, not pricing. Also, it's WTO compliant. Imposed after proof of inquiry. In both these cases, there is an inquiry, there is an investigation, which is prerequisite. Only then you can impose that it is WTO compliant, World Trade Organization compliant. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, this is with respect to the PRAGATI framework. We have the proactive governance and timely implementation framework. Now, this framework was initiated by Prime Minister Modi in order to review the big infrastructure projects which are going on, review the progress of these infrastructure, and to come up with the reasons why they are not progressing well. What are the reasons involved? We had the recent 50th review meeting of the PRAGATI, and in this particular meeting, 3 important issues have been highlighted. The very first is the issue of land acquisition. Because we are not having proper land acquisition, we are not able to do the acquisition of land. What is happening is the projects are stalled. Then we have the forest wildlife environment clearance. They are not being received in time. And then we have the right of use or way. This is the third important issue which has been highlighted. There was a presentation by the Cabinet Secretary, the highest official in the country. And in this particular meeting, the Cabinet Secretary basically talked about that we in India cannot have the policies like we have in the authoritarian regimes. We have to abide by the law of the land, and we have the property as something which is a right, and therefore we need to follow a particular process. We cannot just impose these state directives on the people. More than a third of the infrastructure projects related issues raised under the proactive governance and timely implementation of PRAGATI framework are due to land acquisition problems, with another 38% on account of the forest, wildlife and environmental reasons and the right of use or way, Cabinet Secretary has said. Prime Minister Modi chaired the 50th meeting of PRAGATI, a mechanism that uses technology-based platform to monitor projects that have a cost of at least 500 crores. There can be a question in the prelims. It can alter this particular number, say 1000 crores, but the number is 500 crore. Do remember. The government's top bureaucrat also said that there was no plan to change the land acquisition law. I think what the Cabinet Secretary has said, I think these are going to happen in any democratic society. If we were a country where we can throw people out of their land, you can very well understand that to which country he is referring to right now. And there are some countries like that, or where you can simply do what you want. Those countries may be able to implement faster, but we don't want to be in that situation. We want to implement with consultation, proper consultation, with consent and with public involvement. So I'm not sure that we will really need to embark on regulatory reforms on these fundamental issues of public consultation. Yes, here and there are procedural improvements which can be there, but there has to be focus upon adequate consent and consultation aspect. Large time and cost overruns have been a chronic problems in India's public projects, be it the road projects, be it the power lines, be it the metro projects and schemes, with key reason being that of the lack of coordination between various entities. For example, the central ministries, we have the state governments, we have the district authorities. So for that, we have come up with the PRAGATI framework. Various government levels, the center, state and the local and the states. The PRAGATI framework was instituted a decade ago to resolve these issues, fast-track critical infrastructure projects, improve the outcomes of flagship government schemes, and assess and resolve grievance of the citizens across sectors. Very important, the benefits or the positives of this particular framework. At the top of the framework are review meetings with the Prime Minister, which see the chief secretaries of the states and secretaries in the central government in attendance. The PRAGATI ecosystem has accelerated the implementation of more than 3,300 projects worth more than 85 lakh crores. A total of 7,735 issues have been raised under the PRAGATI framework, of which almost 7,156 have been resolved. So this is the importance of proactive governance. This is the importance of review. This can be cited as a very good example when we talk about the governance aspect in the GS2. Let's talk about PRAGATI. So Prime Minister, and let's talk about the meeting which has taken place on 31st December 2025. Prime Minister chaired the 50th meeting of the PRAGATI, the ICT-enabled multimodal platform for proactive governance and timely implementation. marking a significant milestone in a decade-long journey of cooperative, outcome-driven governance under the Prime Minister, leadership of the Prime Minister. The milestone underscores technology-enabled leadership, real-time monitoring, and sustained center-state collaboration. It can be also given as an example of center-state relations, conducive center-state relations. So Prime Minister has talked about different projects spanning the road, railways, power, water resources. Genesis of Pragati. Recalling the origin of the approach, Prime Minister said that as the Chief Minister of Gujarat, he had launched the technology-enabled Swagat platform, statewide attention on grievance by applications of technology to understand and resolve the public grievance with discipline, transparency, and time-bound action. Building on that experience, we have the Pragati which has come up. So next aspect is that of from silos to Team India. Prime Minister pointed out that projects do not fail due to lack of intent alone. Many fail due to lack of coordination and silo-based functioning. Every entity is performing their own tasks, they're not coordinating well. That is a silo-based work. He said that Pragati has helped to address this by bringing all the stakeholders onto one platform and sharing different outcomes and views. Next aspect is, Prime Minister said that the government has an adequate resources for national priorities with sustained investments in across sectors. Next, the Pragati would be the main important pillar as we talk about the Viksit Bharat by 2047. Prime Minister said that the Viksit Bharat at 2047 is both a national resolve and a time-bound target, and Pragati is a powerful accelerator to achieve it. So this is what the importance of Pragati platform is all about. I hope it is clear. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, here is a mention of one of the very important species in the Western Ghats in Kerala, and that is what the article talks about on the very first page of Indian Express. The Hindu has one very important and favorite topics, and that is with respect to the species. Many of the students are confused that which species to read, what all species to cover. It's but obvious that you cannot cover everything under the sun. But yes, those species or those things which are important, they would be covered in the newspaper, right? Be it the Hindu or the Express. And this has been covered. One very important aspect of the interventions by the humans, which is leading to the loss of biodiversity, has been specified in this article, what they call as phototourism. You must have seen a lot of photographers. They go in these locations and take the photographs, but it is altering the balance of the nature. And because of that, a lot of species are crumbling. And one of the species, it has basically died. There were limited numbers of this particular species, and all of them are now absent, primarily because of the unsustainable phototourism which has been practiced in this particular area. It may be no bigger than a fingertip. Why this is important is because, see, UPSC has a lot of times asked about it has talked about the description of a particular species and then asked what this species is all about. So please pay attention. It may be no bigger than a fingertip, but appears to carry the cosmos on its back, the universe. Its black skin is dotted with pale blue speckles, resembling a clear night sky studded with stars. There are also dashes of orange patterns reminiscent of luminous supernova explosions. Galaxy frogs are one of the rarest and most dazzling amphibians in the world, which live exclusively under the rotten logs in Kerala's Western Ghats, the logs of the woods. However, the elusive species is now disappearing. According to the study, a group of 7 galaxy frogs vanished, all likely to be dead, after multiple photographers descended on their habitats, causing disturbances and behavioral changes that could have disrupted their feeding and breeding success. So we had different scholars, they have done a research on that. We have the fellows at the Zoological Society of London, and P.S. Esa, the chairperson of Thrissur based Arenakam Nature Foundation, a non-governmental organization working for the biodiversity conservation. Although the galaxy frogs were first discovered in 1878, not much is known about them since they are very difficult to find. Measuring between 2 centimeters to 3.5 centimeters, you can have a look. This is a galaxy frog. These frogs do not produce sounds. Scientists believe that they use their spots to communicate, making the existing data about their population and breeding behavior deficient. The frogs are already listed as vulnerable to extinction by the IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature. Among the major threats to these creatures are the conversion of forest areas into the farmlands, firewood collection because they reside on these logs of rotten woods, and landslides. However, in the recent years, phototourism, important, this can be asked in the prelims as a reason, has emerged as a new danger to galaxy frogs, especially after they were designated as a flagship species of Kerala's Mathiketan Shola National Park in 2021. Also find the location of this particular national park. The COVID-19 pandemic, even as the researchers could not return to the area due to the pandemic, hordes of photographers landed at the site between June 2020 and April 2021. The photographers overturned many of these logs just to take pictures. They overturned a lot of these logs of woods while searching for the species. In August 2021, the logs under which the frogs had been discovered earlier had been displaced and the vegetation trampled. The galaxy frogs had vanished. A local informant told the researchers that photographers often captured the frogs with their bare hands and moved them to the moss or other logs for more picturesque backgrounds. Just to have good backgrounds, they basically picked up these frogs and put them somewhere else. The amphibians were exposed to high-powered camera flashes for nearly 4 hours per session. You can very well understand, even the normal cameras, if there's a constant showcase of the flashes, that is very irritating. Just imagine the condition of these frogs. 2 of these frogs had died during these marathon photography sessions. All of them are presumed dead right now. Constant human movement around the frog's habitat can interfere with their breeding processes, as the amphibians typically mate by calling each other. Handling frogs without gloves and exposing them to the heat of flash, as it happened in this case, is also dangerous for the animal. Frogs use their skin for respiration. Remember, again very important for the prelims. They keep their skin moist by secreting a slimy secretion called mucus to breathe through the skin. If their skin becomes dry, which can happen due to heat transfer while handling the frogs or using the flash to photograph them, their activity will be hampered, as they'll not be able to breathe comfortably. Capturing frogs with bare hands can also pose a risk of pathogen transfer from humans to amphibians, exposing them to lethal diseases. That is how the transmission of disease also takes place, from that of the humans to the animals, right? Let's talk about the IUCN. The IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature, is a membership union uniquely comprising both government and civil society. Remember, it has both government as well as civil society. Since the creation in 1948, the IUCN has evolved into the world's largest and most diverse environmental network. Headquartered in Gland, Switzerland, it serves as, also remember the headquarters, it's in Switzerland. It serves as a global authority on the status of natural world and the actions needed to protect it. The Red List, the IUCN oversees the Red List of threatened species, the most comprehensive global inventory on the conservation status of plants and animals. The Red List categories reflect the species risk of extinction. There are 9 categories. You can just have a look. First, we have the non-evaluated, but for those species which are evaluated, we have data deficient, least concern, near threatened, vulnerable, endangered, critically endangered, extinct in the wild, and extinct. Then we have the IUCN World Conservation Congress. The IUCN World Conservation Congress, often called the Olympics of Conservation, is the world's largest and most important conservation event. It's held once every 4 years, the 2025 edition being held in Abu Dhabi, UAE. It aims to conserve the environment, address the sustainability challenges, and improve the natural resource management for humans and the social and economic development. We have the Red List, we've already talked about that. Objective of India's National Red List Assessment Initiative to evaluate the extinction risk of 11,000 species and develop a National Red List supporting biodiversity conservation. Which bodies are implementing the National Red List Assessment? It's the Union Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change in collaboration with Botanical Survey of India, Zoological Survey of India and Wildlife Institute, right? So do pay attention. This is an important topic and I'll tell you about the importance. Look at this. In the year 2022 alone, there are almost 3 questions which are asked with respect to the species. And if you know the answer, please take a pause, read these questions and give me the answer in the comments. Right? Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the next topic, here is a particular mention of a scheme by Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. The Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology approved the 22 new projects under the 22,900 crores, almost 23,000 crores Electronic Component Manufacturing Scheme, ECMS. Under the ECMS, companies making electronics parts will receive payouts based on incremental production and employment. Let's talk about this. We have the ECS scheme. It's a government's incentive scheme to encourage companies to manufacture electronic components in India instead of importing them. So why not? Why you are just importing the components from outside? Why not you do the value addition here itself? Right now, what we are focusing is primarily on the assembly. Right? We are assembling a lot of products. You must have seen, we have a lot of components where it's written, design, for example, in Apple, it's designed in California and assembled in China, right? Because even in China, we have a lot of these components which are imported from Taiwan or some other countries, maybe Korea, right? So in India, we have much of that. We are importing more of these components. The value addition is very less. We are just doing the assembly. Why was ECMS introduced? India assembles many electronic products but imports most of these key components. ECMS intends to reduce the imports dependence, especially on China, strengthen the electronic supply chains, increase the value addition in India, support Make in India and Atmanirbhar Bharat, which is the self-reliance in the manufacturing aspect. What does the scheme support? Manufacturing of semiconductors and chips. Then we have the printed circuit boards. We have the camera modules, the lenses and the optics. Then we have the display components, for example, the LEDs, the LCDs. We have the passive components in the form of capacitors, resistors, so that we don't import these components from outside. Incentives are being provided to the manufacturers so that we ourselves manufacture this and use it. How does the ECMS work? The government provides the financial incentives. Incentives are linked to capital investment and production output. Whatever amount you're going to invest, the capital investment, on that basis, the government would incentivize you, or how much of these commodities you are producing, how much of these components you are producing, the overall production. On that basis, the government would incentivize you. Who implements the scheme? It's the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. Why is ECMS important for India? It's but obvious. We are becoming, we are focusing upon a lot on the new and emerging technology. Therefore, it is but natural that we have our own self-reliant base in these components. Electronics in India is the largest import after the crude oil. Can you just imagine? Why we are spending billions of dollars on the imports on those commodities which we can easily produce? See, for crude oil, it's but okay that we don't have the natural resource. But for these products, we can definitely have our own indigenous base. Without components, India remains only an assembly hub. ECMS helps India to move from assemble in India to make in India. This is what you have to understand. We have different parameters, investments, production, employment, and overall, you can just see the expected outcome is going to be almost double, right? I hope this is clear. Let's go to the next topic. Coming to the last topic of today's discussion, this is with respect to the Russian strike with respect to Ukraine. Now, this is something which has been quite frequent, but from the UPSC perspective, it's very important when we talk about the mapping aspect. A Russian strike Friday on the residential buildings in the major Ukrainian city of Kharkiv wounded at least 19 people. Now, let's talk about this. Let's first talk about the countries which are surrounding Ukraine. We have Russia, we have Belarus, we have Poland, we have Slovakia, we have Hungary, look at this, and we have Romania, we have Moldova. So there are 7 countries in total. Please remember their names. We have Russia, Belarus, Poland, Slovakia, we have Hungary, we have Romania, we have Moldova. Why it's important? Look at this question. Consider the following countries, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Which of the following have borders with Afghanistan? So there can be a question for Ukraine also because it has been in news. Next, you just see, this is a snippet which has been taken from the BBC, and it talks about the status as with respect to on December 19, 2025. Look at these areas, the pink areas, Russian military control has already been established. Then limited Russian military control, the dashed line, you can just see the dashed line by the red, and claimed Russian control, right? So it's advancing. We have certain provinces in Ukraine. We have Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporozhye, Kherson. Crimea was already annexed in 2014. So they have already been occupied, annexed by Russian authorities, Russian military. That is what you'll have to understand. Kharkiv is here. Just look at this particular position. So Russia is even bombarding. If you just look at this particular, can you see this pink area over here? This. So over here also certain areas have been occupied by Russia and it is advancing towards Kharkiv. That is the reason it is bombarding this particular center. And this is Luhansk, Donetsk and Zaporozhye and Kherson. Some part of them have already been occupied by Russian authorities. We already have Crimea, which was annexed way back in 2014 by Russia. Next important point is with respect to the water bodies. We have this as Sea of Azov. We have this Black Sea. And this is the Strait of Kerch. So Kerch separates the Azov Sea with that of the Black Sea. Do remember. Then we have this particular strait as, this particular water body as Sea of Marmara. Right? So we have the Bosphorus Strait over here. Bosphorus Strait between Black Sea and that of the Sea of Marmara. This is what we call as the Strait Dardanelles Strait. Strait of Dardanelles. Now this is between Sea of Marmara and this is Aegean Sea. Do remember. So I have told you 3 straits. The first is that of the Strait of Kerch. Second, Strait of Kerch between Sea of Azov and Black Sea. Then we have the Bosphorus Strait between Black Sea and Sea of Marmara. Then we have the Dardanelles Strait between Sea of Marmara and that of the Aegean Sea. Very, very important. There can be a possible question in the prelims, and also know the bordering countries, and also there can be a question that Luhansk, Donetsk, Zaporozhye were in the news. They relate to what? They relate to the positions, the areas which have been annexed by the Russian military. So this is what you have to understand. I hope it is clear. That's all from my side. All the very best. I hope you like the discussion. All the very best. Thank you so much. Take care.